I didn't want to see it at first. In the beginning, it was easy to explain away the little things. My wife, Elena, was always the life of the party, bright, ambitious, and adventurous. She worked in a high-pressure industry, often pulling long hours and traveling across the country for business deals. I used to admire her for her drive, even when it meant we spent more time apart than together. But over time, those absences began to feel different. Her once detailed stories about clients and office drama grew vague. The late-night calls she took outside, or the occasional text she quickly hid when I entered the room, started gnawing at my gut. I convinced myself it was my imagination, blaming stress or insecurity for the unease brewing inside me. Then came the night that shattered my blissful ignorance. Elena had flown to Chicago for a conference, and I was home, scrolling idly through social media while sipping a cold beer. A message popped up from one of her friends, Hannah, a mutual acquaintance. The tone of her words made my stomach drop. "Mark," she wrote, "I don't know if I should say this, but I think you deserve to know. I saw Elena in a video online, and it's not good. I'm so sorry." I stared at the message, my heart thudding. I asked her to clarify, and after a moment, she sent a link. With trembling fingers, I clicked it. What I saw turned my stomach. There she was, my wife of 6 years, in a cheap hotel room, engaging in acts with a group of men, strangers to me. It wasn't just a single moment of infidelity. It was a production, filmed and distributed online. I slammed the laptop shut and sat frozen in the darkened room. My mind raced as denial, anger, and heartbreak surged through me. This couldn't be real, but it was. The pain of betrayal was unbearable, but my anguish deepened when I realized I wasn't the only one who'd seen it. The video was public. Her colleagues, friends, family, anyone could find it if they searched. I didn't know where to begin, but one thing was clear. My marriage had become a facade, and I was now a spectator to my own humiliation. The hours after I discovered the video felt like an eternity. I sat there in the living room, staring at nothing, my mind replaying the images I had seen. My emotions churned in a violent storm. Anger, sadness, disbelief. How could she do this? How had I not noticed? Hannah's message haunted me. Someone else knew. If she knew, who else did? My thoughts spiraled until they landed on a chilling realization. If it was online, others might already be talking about it. Desperate for answers, I scrolled through social media, checking mutual friends and their activity. Nothing blatant showed up, but the paranoia was deafening. Every cryptic post or ambiguous comment seemed like a knife in my back. Were they about her? About me? Unable to sit still, I grabbed my phone and called Elena. It rang endlessly before going to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. That night, I hardly slept. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I searched for more evidence. I opened the same browser where Hannah had sent the link and hesitated for a moment. My hands shook as I typed Elena's name. The results came up instantly. There wasn't just one video. There were several. Different hotels, different scenarios, and, most sickeningly, different men. I couldn't watch more than a few seconds of each, but the settings and her shamelessness made my blood run cold. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was monetizing it. At that moment, my grief turned into fury. She was flying home that afternoon, and I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. But I didn't want to confront her yet. No, this was bigger than a screaming match. She betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I wasn't about to give her a chance to wiggle out of it with half-baked excuses or crocodile tears. I needed a plan. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything I could. I downloaded the videos, took screenshots, and saved links. Then I started searching for traces of her activity, bank statements, emails, hidden files on her laptop. If she thought she'd gotten away with this, she was about to find out otherwise. By the time Elena walked through the door that evening, I was a bundle of nerves. But I forced myself to play it cool. She kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, then dropped her suitcase by the stairs. "How was Chicago?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She smiled, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "Good. Productive. I'm exhausted, though. Mind if I shower first?" "Go ahead," I said, feigning nonchalance. I watched her walk upstairs, the guilt I imagined in her posture fueling my resolve. Little did she know, her perfect facade was about to crack. As I heard the shower start upstairs, I sat in the living room, staring at the file folder on my laptop. The videos, screenshots, and bank transactions were all organized. Evidence of her betrayal, evidence of my broken life. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but something else had taken its place, a cold determination. When she came downstairs after her shower, dressed casually in one of her oversized t-shirts, her hair damp and twisted into a bun, I almost faltered. She looked so normal, like the woman I'd loved for years. It was hard to reconcile this image with what I'd seen online. "Dinner?" she asked, her voice light, oblivious. "I was thinking takeout. I don't feel like cooking." I gestured to the chair across from me. "We need to talk." Her expression faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Sure. What's up?" she asked, sitting down. I opened my laptop, turned it around, and pressed play. The color drained from her face as the video started. Her voice, sultry and unfamiliar, filled the room, accompanied by sounds I couldn't stomach hearing again. She lunged for the laptop, but I snapped it shut before she could reach it. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Mark, I can explain," she finally stammered, her voice cracking. "Explain?" I barked, unable to contain my anger any longer. "Explain how my wife ended up in multiple videos with strangers? Explain how you've been living this double life while I was home, loving you, trusting you." Her face twisted, and she began to cry. "It's not what you think. It's not like that." "Not like that?" I interrupted, standing up so fast the chair toppled over. "You've been cheating on me for God knows how long, filming it and putting it online. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Who else knows? Elena? How many of our friends? Our family?" Her sobs grew louder, but they didn't move me. Not this time. I'd spent too long convincing myself that her distance, her absences, her late nights were normal. I wasn't about to let her guilt tears change anything. "I did it for the money," she whispered, barely audible. I froze. "What?" She wiped her face, avoiding my eyes. "We were struggling financially. You know that. The house, the car payments, your freelance work being unstable. I thought I could fix it. I thought. You thought selling your body would fix it?" I spat, my voice laced with disgust. "You didn't think to tell me? To let me decide if I was okay with my wife prostituting herself online?" "It wasn't like that," she cried, her voice desperate. "It was just videos. No emotions, no attachments. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't think." "Of course you didn't think," I snapped. "You didn't think about me, about us. You only thought about yourself." The silence between us was deafening. For a brief moment, I thought about throwing her out of the house right then and there. But I wasn't done. "Not yet. I'm giving you one chance to come clean," I said finally, my voice cold. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. 6 months, she admitted, barely above a whisper. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of betrayal. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay composed. "You've destroyed this marriage, Elena," I said. "You've destroyed everything." Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Mark, please." "No," I said, cutting her off. "I'm done listening to you. From now on, you'll hear from my lawyer." Her sobs filled the room as I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't be there. Not with her, not with those memories. I drove aimlessly for hours, the weight of Elena's betrayal pressing down on me like a physical burden. My mind replayed our conversation over and over, dissecting her words, her tears, her excuses. She said she did it for the money, but that didn't make sense. Sure, things had been tight, but we weren't destitute. We weren't losing the house. This wasn't about money. It was about something darker, something she wasn't admitting. Eventually, I found myself parked in front of a small diner on the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow on the cracked pavement. I went inside and ordered coffee, needing something to ground me. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, asked if I was okay. I gave her a tight smile and nodded, but I must have looked worse than I thought because she kept the refills coming without asking. As I sat there, staring into the dark liquid, I made a decision. Elena had destroyed the life we built together, but she wasn't going to destroy me. I wasn't going to crumble under the weight of her actions. If she wanted to play games, I would play them better. I didn't know exactly what my plan was yet, but I knew it would start with exposing her lies. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to sort through the mess she'd made. I started with her emails and texts. She'd left her phone charging on the kitchen counter, a sign, perhaps, that she didn't think I'd have the nerve to keep digging. She underestimated me. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The videos weren't just a side hustle. They were part of a larger operation. She wasn't acting alone. There were messages between her and several men. Some of them producers who coordinated the shoots, others who appeared to be regulars. There were even group chats where she discussed schedules, locations, and payment terms. But what caught my attention most was the money. Bank transfers, PayPal payments, even cryptocurrency deposits, tens of thousands of dollars, all hidden in a separate account I never knew existed. She'd been living a double life in every sense of the word. I took screenshots of everything and saved them to an external drive. This wasn't just about confronting her anymore. It was about protecting myself. If this got out, if people started asking questions, I needed to be able to prove that I wasn't complicit. By the time Elena woke up and came downstairs, I was ready. She froze when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in my hand and the laptop open in front of me. "Mark," she started, her voice shaky, "what are you doing?" "Why don't you tell me?" I said, my tone ice cold. "Explain these messages, these payments, this secret account." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. "I can explain," she stammered. "You've already explained enough," I snapped. "You've lied to me, humiliated me, and now you expect me to believe you're sorry? That this was just some desperate attempt to help us?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. "You're going to pack your things and leave," I said. "Today. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here." "Mark, please," she begged, stepping closer. "We can fix this. I'll stop. I'll do whatever it takes." "It's too late for that," I said, standing up and grabbing my car keys. "You made your choices. Now you'll live with them." I walked out before she could say another word. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed space. The battle wasn't over, but for now, I needed to regroup. I ended up at a small park on the outskirts of town, sitting on a bench overlooking a pond. The calm water mirrored the sky above, an unbroken surface that felt like the opposite of my chaotic thoughts. My reflection stared back at me, and for the first time, I wondered if I had failed to see the cracks in my marriage or if I'd ignored them on purpose. It wasn't just Elena's betrayal that haunted me. It was the realization that I'd been living in a lie for months, maybe years. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved with everything I had, was nothing more than a stranger wearing a mask. The question that gnawed at me now was whether I had played a role in her transformation. I didn't stay long at the park. There was too much to do, too many loose ends to tie up. I returned home a few hours later, unsure of what I'd find. Part of me hoped Elena would be gone, that she would have packed her bags and left quietly. But when I walked through the door, there she was, sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly as I closed the door behind me. I stopped in my tracks. "Excuse me?" "I'm not leaving," she repeated. "This is my home too, Mark. I know I've made mistakes, huge ones, but I'm not going to let you throw me out like I'm nothing." I let out a bitter laugh. "You made yourself nothing the second you decided to do what you did. Don't act like you're the victim here." "I'm not trying to be the victim," she said, her voice trembling. "But we've been through too much to just throw everything away. I love you." "Love?" I spat. "Don't insult me, Elena. Love isn't selling your soul for strangers to exploit. Love isn't hiding bank accounts or lying to your husband. You don't love me, you love yourself. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt a hollow ache, a reminder of what we'd lost. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers she couldn't give, but what would be the point? I'll stay in the guest room, she said quietly. I'll give you space, but I'm not giving up on us. I shook my head, too exhausted to argue. Do whatever you want, Elena. Just stay out of my way. I retreated to our bedroom, slamming the door behind me. The silence that followed was deafening, but it gave me the space I needed to think. If she wasn't going to leave, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. I opened my laptop and began drafting a message to a divorce lawyer, a referral from a friend who'd gone through a messy split himself. The email was simple, direct, and full of anger. I laid out the basics, the infidelity, the videos, the lies. I attached the evidence I had gathered, knowing it would be enough to build a case. But as I hit send, I felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't who I wanted to be. I wasn't the vengeful type. But Elena had turned me into someone I didn't recognize, and I hated her for it. The next morning, Elena was already gone when I woke up. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or uneasy, but I didn't linger on it. My priority was getting through the day. I had a phone call scheduled with the divorce lawyer, and I needed to make sure my emotions didn't cloud my judgment. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Hannah, the friend who had initially sent me the video. Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? It was a simple text, but it struck a nerve. Was I okay? Not even close. But I couldn't bring myself to dump my mess on her, not after she'd already gotten involved by telling me what she knew. Instead, I replied with a brief thanks for reaching out. I'm figuring things out. Her response came quickly. If you need anything, let me know. Seriously. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone aside. I couldn't focus on Hannah's well-meaning concern right now. There were bigger things to handle. The call with the lawyer was sobering. He was professional, straightforward, and a little too optimistic for my taste. You've got plenty of leverage, he said, after I explained the situation. Infidelity is hard to prove in some cases, but with the evidence you've gathered, it's solid. We can argue for a favorable settlement, property division, maybe even alimony if she's made significant income from these activities. The idea of taking money from Elena didn't sit right with me, but I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. What about public exposure? I asked hesitantly. If this goes to court, will people find out? He hesitated. It's possible. Divorce proceedings are a matter of public record, but we can try to keep certain details sealed. That said, if her actions are already online, it may be hard to contain the fallout. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about preserving what little dignity I had left. But the lawyer's words stuck with me. The damage was already done. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, Elena's actions had created a ripple effect I couldn't control. After the call, I sat in silence, contemplating my next move. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to demand answers she couldn't give. But another part of me, a darker, angrier part, wanted her to feel the humiliation I felt. If she wasn't going to leave quietly, maybe it was time to show her exactly what she had unleashed. That evening, Elena came home. She walked through the door cautiously, as if bracing for another confrontation. I didn't even look up from my laptop. Mark, she said softly, standing in the doorway. Can we talk? What's there to talk about? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. You made your choices, Elena. Now I'm making mine. She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. Please, just tell me what I can do. I closed the laptop and looked at her, my gaze cold and unyielding. You can start by telling me the truth. All of it. No more half-baked excuses, no more lies. If you want even the slightest chance of fixing this, you'll tell me everything. Her shoulders sagged, and she sank into the chair across from me. For a moment, she said nothing, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It started as a favor, she said, tears welling in her eyes. A friend needed someone to fill in for a shoot. She said it would be easy money, just a one-time thing. But then the money kept coming, and I don't know. I got caught up in it. I stared at her, incredulous. A favor? That's your excuse? She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I shook my head, my anger bubbling to the surface. You didn't mean for it to go this far? Elena, you turned our marriage into a sideshow. Do you even understand what you've done? She started to cry, but I didn't let her finish. Save your tears, I said, standing up. You don't get to play the victim here. If you want to fix this, you'll have to do a hell of a lot more than cry and apologize. I left the room, her sobs echoing in the background. I didn't know what my next move would be, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and determination. Elena stayed in the guest room, giving me space, though I could feel her presence like a shadow following me through the house. Every time I saw her, I felt the sting of betrayal all over again. I immersed myself in the evidence I'd gathered, organizing and cataloging it like a prosecutor building a case. The more I delved into it, the more I began to understand the scope of her deceit. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated decision, repeated over and over. Each discovery felt like a new wound, but I pressed on, driven by a need for justice. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a notification popped up, an incoming email. It was from Hannah. Subject: I'm here if you need me. I hesitated before opening it. Her messages had been a lifeline in those first few days, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up to anyone yet. Still, curiosity got the better of me. Hi Mark. I've been thinking about you a lot since I sent that message. I hope you're holding up okay. I know this is a terrible situation, and I can't imagine how hard it must be for you. If you need someone to talk to, or even just a distraction, please don't hesitate to reach out. You don't have to go through this alone. Take care, Hannah. Her kindness was genuine, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt for keeping her at arm's length. But I wasn't ready to share my pain with anyone, not even someone as well-meaning as Hannah. I closed the email and went back to work. Elena, however, wasn't content to leave me alone. That night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a soft knock on the door. I ignored it at first, but the knocking continued until I couldn't stand it anymore. What do you want? I snapped, throwing the door open. She stood there in her pajamas, her eyes puffy and red. Mark, please, she said, her voice trembling. We need to talk. We've talked, I said coldly. There's nothing left to say. There's everything left to say, she shot back, her voice rising. You think I don't regret what I did? You think I don't hate myself for hurting you? I can't take this silence anymore. Please, just tell me what you want from me. I stared at her, my anger bubbling to the surface. What I want is for this to have never happened. But you can't give me that, can you? She flinched as if I'd struck her, but I didn't stop. You destroyed us, Elena. You made a choice, over and over again, to betray me. And now you want me to forgive you? To act like we can just move on? I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice breaking. But I want to try. I want to fix this. I let out a bitter laugh. Fix this? How? By erasing the videos? By erasing the fact that you sold yourself to strangers? There's no fixing this, Elena. There's no coming back from what you did. Her tears fell freely now, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. Just a hollow ache where my love for her used to be. I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered. I'll delete the videos. I'll quit the work. I'll go to therapy, to counseling, anything you want. Just don't give up on us. I shook my head, stepping back. It's too late for that. Her sobs followed me as I closed the door in her face. I stood there for a long time, leaning against the door, trying to quiet the storm inside me. I wanted to believe she was sincere, that she was willing to change. But the damage was done, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. The days blurred into each other as I wrestled with my anger, my sadness, and a growing sense of resolve. Elena continued her attempts to repair the damage, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Each, I'm sorry, and I'll make it right only deepened the chasm between us. I couldn't shake the memories of what I'd seen or the humiliation of knowing that others might have seen it too. I didn't tell her about the lawyer or the evidence I'd gathered. Let her think I was still processing, still deciding what to do. It gave me time to plan my next move. One evening, as I sat in the living room scrolling through the digital files, an idea began to take shape. Elena had made me a joke, a laughingstock. But if she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was wrong. I wasn't just going to divorce her. I was going to make her face the consequences of her actions. I started by reaching out to a private investigator. He came highly recommended by my lawyer and had a reputation for uncovering truths people wanted to keep buried. We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, where I handed over the files I'd collected and explained the situation. I need to know how far this goes, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Who she's been working with, who's profiting from it, and how it's all connected. He nodded, his expression professional but sympathetic. I'll look into it. Give me a week. While he worked, I focused on gathering allies. Hannah, who had already shown her loyalty by telling me about the video, became an unexpected source of support. I finally responded to her email, thanking her for reaching out and admitting I was struggling. Her response was immediate and heartfelt, and over the next few days, we exchanged messages that helped me stay grounded. Then there were Elena's friends, the ones I suspected knew about her double life. I started subtly reaching out to them, probing for information without revealing my own plans. Most of them seemed genuinely clueless, but a few reacted with nervous laughter or evasive answers that only fueled my suspicions. One name kept coming up, Victoria. She was one of Elena's closest friends and the one who, according to Elena's texts, had introduced her to the opportunity in the first place. If anyone had answers, it was her. I arranged to meet Victoria under the guise of catching up. We met at a trendy cafe downtown, where she greeted me with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw the look on my face. "Mark, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I think you know," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I know about Elena's videos, Victoria, and I know you were involved." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. But then she recovered, her expression hardening. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I said, leaning forward. "I've seen the texts. I know you helped her get started. You can either tell me everything, or I'll let the police sort it out." Her defiance wavered, and she glanced around the cafe as if searching for an escape. Finally, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Fine," she said, her tone sharp. "Yes, I introduced her to the producers. But it's not what you think. She came to me looking for a way to make extra money. I warned her about the risks, but she didn't care. She said she was desperate." "And you thought it was a good idea to encourage her?" I asked, my voice low but seething. "She's an adult, Mark," Victoria shot back. "She made her own choices. Don't blame me for her decisions." Her words stung, but they only strengthened my resolve. I left the cafe with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Elena hadn't been forced into this. She had chosen it, again and again, knowing full well what it would cost. By the time I got home that evening, I felt a grim sense of clarity. This wasn't just about punishing Elena. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. If she wanted to play games, I was more than ready to join her on the battlefield. The private investigator called me a few days later, his tone measured but tinged with urgency. "I've got something for you," he said. "It's bigger than I expected. Can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a discreet location, a quiet diner on the edge of town. When I arrived, he was already seated, a folder resting on the table in front of him. His expression told me that whatever he'd found wasn't good. "Here's the deal," he began, sliding the folder across to me. "Your wife's involvement goes deeper than just a few videos. She's part of a network, a pretty lucrative one, from the looks of it." I opened the folder and scanned the documents. There were emails, transaction records, and screenshots of private group chats. Names, dates, and dollar amounts jumped out at me, painting a picture I could barely comprehend. Elena wasn't just a participant. She was actively coordinating with others, arranging shoots, and negotiating payments. This isn't just a side hustle, the investigator continued. It's an operation, and from what I've found, she's been in it for at least a year. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. Who else is involved? Mostly people like her, professionals looking for extra cash. But there are some bigger players too. Producers, distributors, even a couple of well-known names in the adult industry. The weight of it all threatened to crush me, but I forced myself to focus. What do I do with this? That depends on what you want, he said. If you're looking to expose her, this is more than enough. But if you're aiming for a clean divorce and a favorable settlement, you'll need to be strategic. This could get messy. Messy was an understatement. As much as I wanted to burn her world to the ground, I had to think about the fallout. For me, for my reputation. I took the folder and thanked the investigator, leaving the diner with a heavy heart. Back home, Elena was in the living room, her face lighting up briefly when she saw me walk in. "Mark," she said softly, setting down her book, "can we talk?" I ignored her and headed upstairs, slamming the door to our bedroom. I could hear her footsteps behind me, hesitant but determined. "Mark, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm trying." "Trying what?" I interrupted, spinning around to face her. "Trying to save your own skin? Trying to pretend this didn't happen? Because from where I'm standing, all you're doing is digging yourself a deeper hole." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't let her speak. "I know everything, Elena. I know about the network, the money, the lies. Don't bother denying it." Her face went pale, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "That seems to be your favorite excuse," I said coldly. "But this time, it won't save you." I pulled out the folder and threw it onto the bed beside her. "Take a good look. This is your legacy, Elena. This is what you've done to us." She picked up the folder with shaking hands, flipping through the pages. As she read, her tears turned into sobs, but I felt no pity. I watched her break, watched her crumble under the weight of her own betrayal. "I'll give you two options," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Option 1, you leave quietly. I file for divorce, and we keep this as private as possible. Option 2, I take this to the police, the lawyers, and anyone else who needs to see it. You'll lose everything, your job, your reputation, your freedom." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "Mark, please." "Choose," I said, cutting her off. She didn't answer right away, her sobs filling the silence. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely audible. "I'll leave." "Good," I said, turning away. "You've got until the end of the week." As I walked out of the room, a grim sense of satisfaction settled over me. This was just the beginning. She had shattered my world, and now it was my turn to dismantle hers, piece by piece. True to her word, or maybe out of fear, Elena began packing her things the next morning. She avoided me as much as possible, slipping between rooms like a shadow. I didn't offer her any help or sympathy. Every suitcase she zipped shut felt like a small victory, though the bitterness in my chest never faded. I stayed out of the house as much as I could, spending time at a nearby cafe or driving aimlessly. Anything to avoid her presence. By midweek, she had moved most of her belongings into storage, and the house began to feel eerily empty. I thought I'd feel relief, but all I felt was anger. When Friday came, Elena stood at the front door, her last suitcase in hand. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. "Mark, I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said, her voice shaking. "But I need you to know that I'll regret this for the rest of my life." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The rage and betrayal were too fresh, too raw. She waited a moment longer, then walked out the door without another word. As her car disappeared down the street, I stood there in silence, trying to process the whirlwind that had become my life. But I wasn't finished yet. Over the weekend, I delved deeper into the evidence the investigator had provided. One file stood out, a series of emails between Elena and a man named D. He wasn't just a producer. He was the mastermind behind the network she had been part of. His messages were detailed and explicit, outlining shoots, payments, and even strategies to keep their activities hidden. It was in these emails that I discovered something even more shocking. Elena had actively recruited others into the network. She wasn't just a participant. She was a collaborator. The realization hit me like a freight train. Her betrayal wasn't just personal. It was calculated. And if she thought she could walk away unscathed, she was sorely mistaken. I reached out to the investigator again, asking him to dig into D. Within days, he uncovered a trove of information: aliases, offshore accounts, and connections to other illicit activities. This wasn't just a small operation. It was a criminal enterprise. Armed with this knowledge, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in criminal law. Together, we compiled the evidence into a case that would expose the network and implicate Elena. I knew it would mean dragging her through the mud, but at this point, I didn't care. She had destroyed our marriage, and I was determined to see justice served. The dominoes began to fall faster than I anticipated. A formal complaint was filed with the authorities, and within weeks, an investigation was underway. Subpoenas were issued, and DS operation was exposed for what it was: a sprawling web of exploitation and deceit. Elena's name was among those implicated, and the fallout was swift. Her employer terminated her, citing unethical behavior as the reason. Friends and family distanced themselves, unable to reconcile the woman they knew with the person she had become. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a mixture of satisfaction and sadness coursing through me. I hadn't just lost my wife. I had lost the life we had built together. But at least now, I wasn't the only one paying the price. The divorce proceedings were brutal but straightforward. With the mountain of evidence on my side, the settlement heavily favored me. Elena walked away with little more than her personal belongings, while I kept the house and most of our assets. As for the legal case against her, it was still unfolding. She faced charges of conspiracy and fraud, along with several others in the network. I didn't attend the hearings, but I kept tabs on the proceedings through my lawyer. Knowing that she was being held accountable was enough. Months passed, and the dust began to settle. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but it gave me the space I needed to heal. Hannah became an unexpected source of comfort, her messages and phone calls helping me piece my life back together. She never pushed, never pried. She simply listened, and for that, I was grateful. One evening, as I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Elena's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still here, still standing. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to walk it. Alone or with someone new, I didn't know. What mattered was that I had reclaimed my life, and no one would ever take that from me again.